My HOA hit me with more than $250,000 in violation notices over the course of 18 months. Not legitimate violations. Not honest mistakes. These were fabricated citations, carefully manufactured to bleed me financially and pressure me into giving up the home I worked so hard to buy. But I kept records of everything. Every notice, every email, every photograph. Then I hired an attorney. And when the hearing finally arrived, something happened that nobody in that courtroom expected. The HOA's own lawyer stood up, stared directly at the board members, and resigned on the spot. Didn't expect that twist? Trust me, it gets even crazier. Before we get into the story, tell me where you're watching from. Drop your country in the comments below. My name is Roland Beckett. 9 years ago, I purchased a home on Sycamore Crest Drive. It sat at the end of a peaceful cul-de-sac in one of those suburban neighborhoods where neighbors waved from their driveways and children stayed outside riding bikes until the streetlights came on. The HOA was there, of course, but for the first 6 years I barely noticed it. We paid our annual dues, received a few newsletters throughout the year, and occasionally got reminders about parking during holiday gatherings. Nothing unusual. Then Miriam Holt became president of the HOA board. That's when everything changed. Miriam had moved into the neighborhood roughly 2 years before the trouble started. She was extremely organized, highly driven, and always wore a pleasant smile that somehow felt cold at the same time. Within only a few months of joining the board, she completely overhauled the violation committee, revised the fine structure, and hired her brother-in-law as the HOA's independent contractor for maintenance work. At the time, none of us understood what she was putting into motion. The first violation notice arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. According to the letter, my mailbox violated community standards. Specifically, the HOA claimed the mailbox post leaned 4.2 degrees beyond the approved limit. The penalty was $800. I laughed when I read it. I actually walked outside, looked at my perfectly straight mailbox, and assumed someone had made a clerical error. I emailed the board, politely explained the situation, and waited for correction. Instead, they denied my appeal. Then they doubled the fine. Now I supposedly owed $1,600 for a mailbox that wasn't leaning at all. I paid it because I believed it was an isolated mistake. It wasn't. The following month brought 3 additional violations. My driveway supposedly had unauthorized discoloration. My front porch light allegedly exceeded approved wattage limits. My landscaping mulch was cited for being the wrong shade of brown. Each notice carried fines ranging from $500 to $1,200. That's when I started documenting everything. I photographed every corner of my property, every wall, every fixture, every flower bed. Every image was time-stamped and uploaded to cloud storage. What most people don't understand about HOA harassment is that it doesn't start out feeling like a battle. It feels like paperwork, forms, letters, notices, appeals. And by the time many homeowners realize what's really happening, they're already exhausted enough to surrender. I wasn't willing to surrender. By the 6th month, the alleged fines had ballooned past $40,000. Neighbors had begun whispering. Several quietly admitted they had received similar notices. Most paid them without arguing and tried to move on with their lives. One family in particular, the Yamamotos, received repeated lien threats. Eventually, they sold their home below market value just to get away from the situation. That was the moment everything clicked for me. This wasn't simple incompetence. This was a system. So I hired an attorney. Her name was Claudette Ferris, and she had spent more than 15 years handling HOA disputes. She reviewed every piece of evidence I had collected, every photograph, every email exchange, every certified letter. After several days, she looked up from the documents and said something I will never forget. "Roland, somebody here is committing fraud." She wasn't speculating. She had already begun digging through records. The HOA's own violation logs showed that my property had supposedly been inspected on multiple dates when the sign inspector, Miriam's brother-in-law, Desmond, could be proven to have been out of state. Then things became even stranger. The photographs attached to many of my violation notices weren't even pictures of my property. Different roof lines, different front doors. One image even showed mountains in the background. I live in Ohio. There are no mountains behind my house. The evidence had been manufactured, every bit of it. And that's when this story took a turn I never could have predicted. Claudette didn't stop after uncovering the fake violations. As part of our lawsuit, she subpoenaed the HOA's financial records. What came back revealed something far bigger than fabricated citations against me. It exposed an operation. For nearly 3 years, Miriam had allegedly been running a money extraction scheme throughout the neighborhood. Violation fines were collected from homeowners, recorded internally as administrative income, and then transferred to a vendor account connected to an outside company. That company turned out to be a shell corporation, and it was registered to Desmond. The money wasn't being deposited into HOA reserve accounts. It wasn't being used for community improvements, repairs, or maintenance. According to records, it was flowing directly into accounts they controlled. When Claudette calculated the total amount collected from residents who had quietly paid the fines over the years, the number exceeded $250,000. Suddenly, it became clear that I wasn't the only target. I was simply the only homeowner who refused to walk away. So we filed suit. The HOA board responded by hiring a local attorney named Preston Gorel. Preston carried himself with confidence. He was polished, experienced, and during the first 2 pretrial hearings, he treated our case as if it were a nuisance. Motion after motion was filed seeking dismissal. Every one of them failed. The evidence was too strong. Eventually, the day of the main hearing arrived. The courtroom wasn't large. It was one of those older civil courtrooms with worn carpet, humming fluorescent lights, and a faint smell of aging paperwork. Miriam sat at the defense table wearing an expensive blazer that probably cost more than one of my mortgage payments. Desmond sat beside her. Across the aisle, Preston opened his briefcase and began arranging documents for the hearing. Then everything changed. His phone rang. He glanced at the screen, stood up, and stepped outside. 3 minutes later, he returned. The difference was impossible to miss. The color had drained from his face. His expression had gone completely blank. Without saying a word, he walked to the defense table and leaned down toward Miriam. He whispered something in her ear. Immediately, she grabbed his arm. Preston pulled away. Then he stood. The courtroom fell silent. He looked directly at the judge and spoke. "Your Honor, I need to withdraw from this matter immediately. I have become aware of information that creates a direct conflict with my professional and ethical obligations to this court." The judge stared at him. Miriam stared at him. I turned toward Claudette. She didn't even react. Not a blink. Later we learned what had happened. Less than 30 minutes before the hearing, Preston discovered that his own law firm had unknowingly processed formation paperwork for Desmond's shell company years earlier. If he continued representing the defendants after learning that information, his firm risked becoming entangled in the case itself. He had no choice. He walked away. Just like that, Miriam was left sitting at the defense table without legal counsel. The hearing moved forward anyway, and by the time it ended, the judge had issued a temporary injunction freezing the HOA's financial accounts. The fallout came quickly. 2 weeks later, the board was dissolved under court order. Civil fraud judgments were entered against both Miriam and Desmond. Soon after, the county district attorney's office opened a separate criminal investigation. Several former residents who had previously paid questionable fines and moved away were contacted regarding restitution proceedings. But the most shocking part came later. After Preston withdrew, Miriam hired another attorney. That attorney eventually contacted Claudette to discuss the possibility of a settlement. During the conversation, he accidentally revealed something none of us had known. According to him, Miriam had singled out my property from the beginning. She wanted it. She had studied the lot size, evaluated its redevelopment potential, and concluded that it would be valuable for a tear-down and rebuild project. Rather than making an offer, she chose another strategy. She intended to pressure me financially until I gave up and left. Everything that happened flowed from that decision. The endless notices, the escalating penalties, the fabricated inspections, the $250,000 in fake violations, all because she wanted my land. In the end, she never got it. I'm still living here. The mailbox is still perfectly straight. And the neighborhood is peaceful again, not because people are intimidated, because the people causing the damage are gone. If there's one lesson I learned from all of this, it's simple. Document everything. Save every email. Photograph everything. Keep records of every conversation, every notice, and every date. Because sometimes the strongest move you can make isn't fighting harder. It's refusing to quit when someone is counting on you to surrender. If this story kept you hooked, make sure to subscribe to HOA Revenge Stories. We bring you new stories every week. And believe me, the next one is even crazier.